This is Gary Swanson, accompanied by Ann Brownfield, interviewing Nancy Hipsh for the Historic Garment District Project of Kansas City, sponsored by the Historic Garment District Museum of Kansas City. And the interview is being conducted on May the 25th, 2005. Nancy, I know that your family has been involved in the garment industry in Kansas City for a long time. Who's the patriarch of your family? Your grandfather who began the business?
Yes, it was Harry Hipsh.
Harry Hipsh. And where was Harry born? Was he born in this country?
He was not born in this country, and I'm not exactly sure where he was born. When I was going through a lot of the papers, and it says Russia. But as I was growing up, I heard a lot that it was on a piece of land that went back and forth between Germany and Poland.
I see.
Plinsk and Plotsk. One of my, somebody was from Plinsk and the other one was from Plotsk.
Now, and your grandmother, was she born over there as well?
Yes, I believe so, because they both had, I asked my older cousin Sanford, who remembers them both, and they had accents. They both spoke Yiddish.
And his name again was?
Harry.
Harry, and her name was?
Minnie.
And they met here in Kansas City, to the best of your knowledge?
I doubt it. They were married in New York.
Married in New York, so probably met in New York. Any idea why they came to Kansas City?
No.
Mm-hmm.
No.
So they came to Kansas City at any rate sometime, and...
But I don't know if they came separately or together. They came in, Harry came in 1898.
1898.
He came to Kansas City in 1898.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And how many children did Harry and Minnie have?
They had 4 sons, 2 years apart. Everybody was 2 years apart. Carl, the oldest, was born in 1898. Martin was born in 1900. My father was born in 1902, and Sammy was born in 1904.
Okay, so your daddy, who joined with his father in the garment business, or whatever they were doing at that time, as he grew up, in 1902 he was born, so in 1920 he had been 18 years old, and was your grandfather in Kansas City in the garment industry at that time, to the best of your knowledge, when your daddy was probably 18?
Oh, before then. When he came to Kansas City, he opened up a dry goods store at 420 West 9th. And then, the year after my dad was born, in 1903, he went to California for the gold rush.
Your grandfather?
Grandfather.
Did he drag Charles along?
No, I guess Minnie and the boys stayed here.
No.
And he didn't have any luck there, so he came back. And he...
Is that what, go ahead, consult your notes. Is that when he opened the dry goods store?
No, he opened the dry goods store at 420 West 9th before then. Then he went to California, and when he returned, he decided to start the cap business.
The cap business, manufacturing and sale of caps?
Yes. He, apparently, before he came to this country, I think he was in England, where he had apprenticed with a cap maker. Mm-hmm. And one story went, he made his first cap from a discarded vest, another from an old suit. But in the basement of the dry goods store, he started making the caps. And the business grew, and it became the largest cap making business west of the Mississippi. And then in 1929, he sold the cap business and he began manufacturing ties. And there were two stories of why he did this. One that I read in something said that he went to the caps because of the closed automobile. And so they figured that people would not be wearing caps anymore. It's a different style, a closed automobile,
Yeah.
no caps. But my dad, the story he told that I heard also was that it was the Depression, and they figured something was going to go, and so people wouldn't be wearing hats so much. They could save money by not wearing hats.
Now your daddy, did he serve in World War I?
No.
Or did any of the four sons serve in World War I? Do you know?
I believe Carl might have been in World War I.
The oldest, who was born in ‌98.
Yeah.
So in 1916, he would have been 17, 18 years old, and certainly eligible.
Dad said he was too young for the First World War and too old for the Second World War.
Mm-hmm. So did your dad, to the best of your knowledge, join with his father as soon as he became a man, as soon as he became 18 years old, 19, something like that?
I guess he was just always working for his dad.
From the time you said boy, I'm sure your dad found something for his four sons to do.
Right.
And so your father, Charles, would have been involved in that. So they abandoned the sale of caps when the automobile with a top on it came, because no more blowing in the wind, and began making ties. What kind of material do they use to make the ties? Do you know? It
was wool, and they made the material themselves.
So he hired women to actually, on a loom, make material for ties.
They opened up factories. And at one time they had factories in Adrian, Rich Hill, Odessa, and Holden, Missouri. And the one I was able to find the most information out about was Holden.
And so they loomed, probably got farmers' wives or anybody to come in and make the fabric.
Yes.
And then did they manufacture the tie at each of those locations where the fabric was loomed?
My cousin Sanford, he said in Holden they had one plant that was this. Now we're talking about the war, that did jackets, and I can tell you about that. And then they had a separate plant that did do the ties. My uncle Martin, he moved to Holden, and he ran the manufacturing plant in Holden.
Mm-hmm. How many of the four Hipsh sons of Harry were involved in the family companies?
They were all involved.
They were all.
Carl, the oldest, I think he had some kind of a heart problem in his late 20s. And from then on, he never worked. My dad just supported him.
Mm-hmm.
And he went and lived most of the year in California, in Los Angeles. He lived at the Chapman Park Hotel, and he knew all the movie stars, and he had this great life. He was a bachelor, he never married, and I have signed pictures from Elvis Presley and Frank Sinatra and Robert Wagner, and he would come back and go down to the office and do something. Martin, like I said, he ran the
Holden operation.
And then Sammy did a lot with textile distributors. At one point, the company changed its name from the cap manufacturing, from Hipsh Incorporated, to Textile. And then they had this warehouse on May Street. This was behind Textile Distributors.
812 May Street.
Uh-huh. And this is after the war. I'm jumping ahead a little bit.
Yes, okay, but so when did he go from caps to ties? Because going from 1920 to 1942 is a long time. Do you know when that was?
Let's see. It goes... Do you want to stop that a minute?
So to the best of your knowledge and recollection of the records that you have, when did the Hipsh companies go from caps to ties?
That was in 1929.
Okay.
That was when the sales of caps was seriously retarded because of the advent of the closed automobile and the bareheaded fad.
It's amazing how weather and affects changes in fashion, isn't it? So they made ties, and they had these 5 factories at which they loomed the material. They had ladies actually on a loom making the material, woolen, out of woolen fabrics, and then they manufactured the ties. How did they distribute the ties? Do you know? How did they sell them? Did they have salesmen on the road,
Yes.
or? And they advertised significantly in the publications, didn't they?
Yes, it looks like they would send out cards and tell people where they would be in such and such a hotel and such a room at such and such a date. And in one article, it said that, well, this is later on when they got into that Blue Mountain Bridge stuff, that they were one of the few Missouri companies that was featured in Esquire magazine.
Is that right? Well, that's wonderful. How many, no idea of how many big tie manufacturers there were in the country or their position in that industry. Do you have?
No, I don't know that.
Yeah, well, they were the largest west of the Mississippi in caps. It probably stands to reason that because of the aggressiveness of the 4 Hipsh brothers and their dad, that they probably held that same position in ties.
Probably.
And so a tie was what? How much, $1?
$1.
So for $1 you could buy
Well,
a hand-loomed,
yes.
a handmade tie.
Yes. This is a quote from an article out of the Holden newspaper, and it says, "To our knowledge, there is no other tie concern in the United States retailing ties at $1, who develop their own patterns, weave their own fabric by hand, and manufacture their own product."
Well,
now, they did have ties for $1.50 and $2.52 that were silk.
Yeah, that's quite a claim. And so they stayed in 29. They were they exclusively ties, to the best of your knowledge, until the war began in 41.
I guess so. And then, like I said, I have a lot of information about Holden, this plant in Holden, because apparently they went there and they were the largest employer there, and they meant a lot to that town.
I'll bet. How many people did they employ? Any idea?
Well, at one place I have that they employed 181 people. And they had a factory that, their new factory there occupied 3,300 square feet of floor space, all on one floor, equipped with all the newest and most modern equipment, including a complete layout of fluorescent lighting.
Okay, now Nancy, where were you living at that time? You personally were a little girl somewhere. Where were you living here in town?
Well, I wasn't born yet. My dad wasn't even married yet.
I
at
see.
This point.
Okay, when did your dad get married?
He married at the age of 44. He got married in 45.
In 1945, and what was his bride's name?
Dorothy Wengrover.
And that was her maiden name, Wengrover?
Wengrover.
Dorothy Wengrover. Now, he held out for a long time.
He
Now,
did.
where did she where did Dorothy and and your daddy Charles Hipsh meet? Do you know?
They met through my mother's brother-in-law, High Vile.
Okay, the well-known printer and lithographer here in town.
Vile Goller. High was married to my mother's oldest sister.
I see.
And he was a good buddy of my dad.
And he got them together and sparks flew. How quickly did they get married after they first met, do you know?
I think it wasn't too long, maybe about 3 months.
Well, when you waited to 44,
Right.
what's the point of waiting
And
much
my mother
longer?
was 29.
And your mama was
she was living
29.
in St. Louis at the time.
Uh-huh. But sparks flew and they got married.
Yes.
And we'll digress here just a minute, but from that union were born, how many brothers and sisters do you have?
From my dad, who was one of 4 boys, he had 4 girls.
4 girls. And who is the oldest?
The oldest is my sister Miriam,
And then?
then me, then Harleen. By the time they got to number 3, they gave that H out because we were all supposed to be Harry. And then I have a sister Ellen.
Now, Ella?
Ellen.
So Ellen must have been born when
Dad
Harry
was
when Charles had a few years on him.
Dad was 55.
55 years old when he fathered the last of 4 daughters. Are you you're obviously living? Are all your sisters
Yes.
living?
Yes,
That's
thank
wonderful.
God.
And you were the
We're
next
all healthy.
to the oldest of the 4 daughters. You must have been a great source of pride and joy to your father, who had no children, wasn't married, had nobody who loved him that much until we got married at 44, and then wow, 4 daughters.
I just loved him to death.
Well, I know that's true. I have 3 daughters,
great
and
dad.
girls love their
Oh,
daughters,
yeah.
or daughters love their
And
daddies.
dads love their daughters.
Yes, they do.
He was a very kind dad.
Okay, now,
Strict.
World War II came along, and things changed for the hitch companies, and you were you born during the time of World War II? Were you
I was born in June of 48.
okay, so you were not a gleam in your daddy's eye at that time. You had other sisters. What did the hitch companies do during World War II?
Well, they made army jackets and fatigues. And then they had this separate building for the ties.
Okay,
My
so
cousin Sanford
kept this
was
tie
telling me that.
business and then went into military production.
Yeah, and I thought this was really interesting. It says, this is an article, March 15th, 1945. This is from the Holden paper. And it says, well, the heart of it here says that Hipsh is one of the few selected manufacturers making a special type of jacket that has protective devices for the enlisted men.
Sounds interesting.
I wish I had one and knew what the special devices were, but I thought that was really interesting.
So they continued that activity during the war,
Right.
and
Right. And down in Holden, they had these picnics and
all kinds of company things.
Yeah.
Well, you said it was the biggest employer in town.
yeah.
And at that particular time, it was the age of the paternalistic employer who would have picnics for the family and in the summertime, and have magicians and jugglers and that sort of thing as a gift to the employees.
I don't know if they had magicians and jugglers, but they had a lot of food, because I saw the video, there were films from it. They had a lot of food, a lot of swimming.
Yes.
And I know that they had here in Kansas City too, they had a baseball team. Because I found a little thing about that too, so they had a baseball team. So,
But it was the era of where the company took care of the people, and the people had good loyalty to the company. And
Absolutely.
particularly in a town like Holden, where you had 181 people
Absolutely.
employed by one employer, which was unheard of probably at that time.
Yes, in the Holden paper, I found many, many articles about the Hipsh company and how important they were to them, and they were a real vibrant part of the life.
You continued, I'm sure, with the military production as well as ties during the war. That went away after the war. And did the company continue with ties only, to the best of your knowledge?
There, it gets shaky for me. I couldn't really find a lot about what happened, but I know they quit manufacturing. And I did find this because I thought this was interesting. Well, because I wondered what happened to the looms. Now, I remember growing up that we had a couple of those looms in our basement. So I can remember as a little girl playing on them, doing the things on them. And then, and I know Dad gave some of them, maybe it was those that had been in the basement, to the Jewish Home for the Aged that was...
On homes?
Yes, so that the elderly could whatever with them. But then I found this article too that says the Menninger Foundation at Topeka is the beneficiary of a complete shop of hand-weaving equipment donated by Charles Hipsh, president of Textile Distributors. There are 17 hand looms, a bobbin winder, creel, warping machine, and finishing machine. Wool, rayon, or combination fabrics can be woven in strips of up to 39 inches wide on the looms, and plaids, checks, stripes, and plain colors can be produced. The equipment was formerly used in a branch plant of Hipsh's company at Rich Hill, Missouri, and later at 1623 Oak. The latter plant was closed about a year and a half ago. I'm not exactly sure when a year and a half ago is. Hipsh began looking around for an institution which could make good use of it, but did not find a proper location until Mayor H. Robartle, who is a member of the Board of Governors of Menninger Foundation, suggested it. The mayor said replacement cost of the equipment would be about $20,000.
So when they quit production, manufacturing, then what? How did the business morph? What did it evolve into?
Then they became like jobbers. Then I think that's when they started calling it textile distributors. And they had this big warehouse, and it was like on May, and they jobbed their stuff to Katz's, and that's the big one I know of, that their stuff was in Katz's. So they weren't manufacturing it anymore. And they had this big warehouse, and I can remember at noon, people would line up, and they would let them come into the warehouse and buy stuff wholesale. And Sanford, my cousin Sanford, said that in the summer when he was working there, and he's a lot older than I am.
What's Stanford's last name?
Sanford, Hipsh.
Is he still living?
He's still living.
Go ahead.
I wanted him to be here, maybe he will be for the next time, but he worked there in the summers, and he said he can remember in the summers that there was this one guy who came in who was like a peddler, and he would buy the stuff, and then he would go peddle it.
And then you probably also had salesmen on the road selling to the trade, to fabric stores in these little towns. How long did they stay in business before they closed the front door? You know?
Well, I don't know exactly when textile distributors shut down, but what happened was in 1963, then my dad established Empire State Bank. And I found this article, I thought it was interesting. Everything's up to date in Kansas City.
Just hold it up there now.
Including its new Garment District Bank.
And which one is your daddy in that picture?
This one.
The one on the far left. Do you know the other two?
Well, I can tell you who was on the board.
Yeah, who was on the board when your daddy established the bank, which was when again?
1963.
1963, some 42 years ago.
Right, okay. One of the things was, it was my dad's dream. A lifelong dream from the time when he was a boy. He said when he was a boy, and he would take his, the money that his father had, and he would take it up to the produce bank on 6th and Walnut. And my father was at the corner of 9th and Broadway for 77 years. That family was established there. And one of the things he was really proud of is that there was never a strike. They never stopped working. They never ran out of money for 77 years. What was it you asked me?
And you told me when they were established, who were on the board of directors?
Who else was in it? Okay. The first people who were... Ricky?
He likes me, it's all right.
No, he'll just keep barking. He won't stop. The associated with the first people associated with the bank were George Aylward, a lawyer, George Goldman, who was of Goldman Jewelers, Lem T. Jones, who had recently retired as president of Russell Stover, Henry Poindexter, executive vice president of H.T. Poindexter and Sons, Morris Shalinsky, president of the Katz Drug Company, and Mrs. Mary Hudson Vandergrift, co-owner of Hudson Oil Company.
So a series of business leaders here in the community were on his first board
Yes,
of directors, and that was 1962,
63.
and he continued in the business. You said he was at the corner of 9th and Broadway for 77 years, the Hipsh family, until when the bank was sold to whom, when?
The bank was sold to George Lear, Herb Kahn, and Steve Pack.
And your father, he was still living at that time when
Yes.
when the bank was sold.
They moved him up to the second floor.
Okay,
He
now,
was still there just for a while.
when he also evolved from caps, ties, manufactured for the military during World War II. He also evolved into a line of what I'd call ceramic products.
Right. This was around the time when they were in Holden in the 40s, and apparently my dad liked this artist, and he commissioned this man, Paul Genter. He was the sculptor, and they had a factory in Zanesville, Ohio, that manufactured these hillbilly art.
Yes, hillbilly art.
And they would put like lotion in them and aftershave, and they promoted them.
That was very popular. Hillbilly art was very popular at that time. And probably still is.
And they each had a little story to them.
I see.
The art
And that was before he got in the banking business.
Oh yeah,
Once he got in the banking business, he was through with the
yeah.
retail.
His
So,
dream was always to be in the banking business.
No,
ever since he was young, and he carried the bank deposits from his father's cap manufacturer.
and I think it'd be fair to say, if you thought of who was the banker to the garment industry, it was Charles Hipsh at the Empire Bank.
After 1963, yes. And I thought it was really neat that they...
To the best of your knowledge, because another 10 years or 15 years after that is when the garment industry went south, in Kansas City for a number of reasons. But did the bank prosper in spite of that fact? How was he, or you may not even know, but how was he as a lender? Since he had known the difficulties of surviving in the garment industry. He would certainly know the challenges that were being faced by people who'd come in, sit across the desk from him, and ask for a loan.
Dad was fortunate that during his lifetime, he didn't come under the, at the end of his business career with the bank. I mean, I can remember like when the federal regulators would come in, it would be very tense around the dinner table because it was very hard for him, because this was a man who all his life did business with a handshake. Your word was what you said, his word was what he said. And I mean, you know, we're nowhere near that today, but he totally understood. He got, it's so nice when people remember him, but a lot of people will come up to me and my sisters and say how Dad helped them get started.
Well, that's a great legacy to leave.
It is.
And I can understand how a man who would make deals on a handshake and feel a little bit leery when
Yeah,
people came in to scrutinize the
Yeah.
written word and all that.
yeah.
And when was the bank sold? What year?
Well, I think it was around 77.
77.
Uh-huh.
Did the family retain any interest in the bank?
I think a little for a while. He still owned the building. And I had a thought left me. Dad always believed in downtown. He knew it would come back. He always believed in downtown.
And when you were a high school girl,
Uh-huh.
where did your family live?
We lived on West 66th Street,
West 66th Street,
between Ward Parkway and State Line.
and went to school at Southwest High School,
at
probably.
Southwest.
That was the golden part of the of the housing at that time in Kansas City.
It was, and we loved our house. We had a beautiful house, but my dad was very successful. He gave a lot of it away. He was very charitable. He came from very, very humble roots. They were very poor, and I remember him saying one of the happiest moments of his life was being able to give his mother electricity. He was discriminated against, couldn't play in certain areas because of being Jewish, and he made all of our furniture, he made all of our play equipment in the back. He enjoyed being generous.
He was a good daddy.
in a way.
Are any of your fathers obviously passed away now? Have all four of the brothers passed away?
Yes. Yes.
So
But he was the last.
he was the last one
It was very hard.
to go. And what year did he pass away?
He died in 1981.
81, and your mother?
She died in 1990.
But they left a great legacy to their children. And how many, did they take a lot of pride? Did your daddy take a lot of pride in his grandchildren?
He only knew one. He only knew one granddaughter, Kara. My youngest sister had the first grandchild. And, but my older sister has a daughter named after our mother. The sister younger than me, she has 4 children. Her oldest daughter is named Charlie. Her oldest son is named Sam. The next son is named Asa Carl. And her youngest son is Isaac Martin. So all the names.
The 4 brothers are represented in her children. Yeah, that's neat. You have a wonderful scrapbook, which will tell more about the company even than the words in reading or knowing about the history from the olden paper. Before we look at that, though, I want to let's identify You have some great pictures and pencil drawings of your family members. Let's take a look at them.
That's Harry Hipsh and Minnie Hipsh. Her
Oh.
maiden name was Radgiff, R-A-D-G-I-F, or R-A-G-I-F-F, or
Who came over from the old country, and let's just go over to the right. Is that your daddy? there?
that's my dad and my mother. And I wanted that picture there because he couldn't have done it without her. Well, he did a lot of it with her before they married, but
Well, let's identify who are the
and
two fellows.
her name's Dorothy. Dorothy Wengrove.
Dorothy.
Hipsh.
Let's look at the fellow on the left in the pencil drawing. Is that one of the brothers?
This is Charles, my
Okay,
father.
that's your daddy, a pencil drawing of him.
Right, he's the third oldest.
All right, and then the one on the right, the pencil drawing,
That is Carl, the oldest.
the oldest. And let's go down on the bottom, and the fellow in the glasses.
Harry Hipsh.
Okay,
The younger
that's
Harry Hipsh.
a grandfather when he was a little older, or younger rather.
Uh-huh.
And the fellow with the
This one,
handmade tie there, with the Hipsh tie on, who is he?
that's Martin, the second oldest.
Second oldest. And then on the right,
Sam, the
Sammy.
youngest.
mhm.
And my father stayed in the business until the thing that's made him get out of the business was health. First, my mother's health. She had a bout with cancer, and then my dad had a series of strokes and heart issues.
And he died relatively young, what, 79? If you were
79.
born in 1902 and he died in 81.
Yeah.
Now what is this little be happy with Hipsh?
Well, serving you since 1896. Seeing there it says 96. Cards, just free car washes. Great
All right,
idea.
all right. So,
Do you know what they are, Ann?
Yeah.
Do you want to do that?
yeah, we'll just sum them.
Well, we're
But
just-
there's a very good, what did you,
This one is,
tell her what you had to say about this.
yeah, this one, Harry was asking how they distributed their merchandise, and they set up rooms in a hotel, and this was one at the Mulebach, and the buyers would come in and buy.
Right, did you see all the cards?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and then there's a letter in there on, well, it was real cute, on the muffler set, that's in that middle one, for $10.95 or whatever it was. But also on this next page is about when they started making silks and rayons and then doing their own designs and printing. They made the fabrics in Rich Hill, and then they went over to Adrian and printed them, and they hired a guy from Chicago to come in and
Consult with them on dyes and so on?
oversee the dyes. They had special dyes.
You know enough about that, then talk about it. Just sit down like you were. I mean, you know what, based on what Ann said, you know enough about it too. And we're going to stress the,
That was in 1948.
we're going to stress that.
48. We're going to stress,
Well, we're going to stress how they sold the stuff,
How they
one,
sold
and
it.
then secondly, the extent to which they went to make sure they had a high quality when they started making silk and rayon. You know, they did their own printing at one plant. They had a consultant from Chicago on dyes to help them get just the right patterns. Yeah, just, gloss it up here a little bit. Oh, I don't know.
here's one of the things from the scrapbook. It shows how they sold their product. Like here they were going to set up in room 610 of the Mulebach Hotel. You are cordially invited to visit our new office at 819 Broadway.
Mm-hmm. And
This
so
was in 1948.
19. So that was a common way for them to market their products, was
Right.
to go to buyers in conventions and hotels. And then I think when they graduated from perhaps they still did hand loom ties. I see ties there in 9 colors, but from hand loomed, making their own materials, to imprinting their own fabrics of rayon and nylon, which became silk rather, which became very popular in ties.
Right, they had factories in Rich Hill and in Kansas City, and the hand weaving was completed in Rich Hill. And then they would, for the special printing process that was required, they had a man from Chicago, and he was the, I guess the artist from Chicago, and he would do that in Adrian, Missouri.
And they had special dyes that were overseen by the consultant from Chicago. That's very interesting. The Blue Mountain motif was a big part of the Hipsh Inc. companies, and this is what I'm calling hillbilly art. I don't mean to demean it, but and so your father and the company had a number of advertisements that they would put out, such as these, that would attract people to the artistry and collectability of your product there. And here's Ma chasing a bear. What's the caption on this?
It says, "Ma don't want no bullet holes in him. She wants him for a rug." See, I think he did a lot with the paperwork, and then from there, then he wanted to go into the
I see.
the ceramics.
I see. To the best of your knowledge, are these collectibles today?
Yes, they are.
What's this ad, Nancy?
This is the very first Blue Ridge Mountain ad. This was from 1937.
1937, hand-woven cravats, and beauty, style, extra value, and they had, very nice, very nice,
Homespun.
very nice. Valentine, sent out by the Hipsh Company, and up here it shows from the heart of America, which is Kansas City, of course, shows the locations of the plants. And then the great message, may this be the last Valentine's Day that our boys spend away from home. So that would have been in the 40s, and it was signed by
Hipsh
Dad.
Incorporated.
Yeah, by Hipsh Incorporated. The wish nearest to our hearts.
And
That's very nice. So your daddy and was a patriotic man, do you think? I mean, he realized what this country was doing for him as well as he doing for the country?
absolutely, and as big as that scrapbook is, I have other scrapbooks that are full of my dad's awards and civic awards and his political involvement. He was a very strong Democrat. He had relationships with Roe Bartle, Harry Truman. I have a picture in the back room of him and Eleanor Roosevelt. He loved that stuff.
That's wonderful. Now your mother's daddy was a tailor as well, right?
He-
And this is showroom. Now where was he located and what did he make? Coats and alterations and suits and that sort of thing?
I do know that he did come from Russia at age 14, and his wife, Sarah, she came over when she was 2, and he was a tailor, and he made all the uniforms for the Church of the Latter-day Saints. And he was a tailor, he made coats, and I believe that this was on 12th Street, or it was real east on 47th Street. Here's another little picture. If you
Okay,
can
there's a
get it on this.
picture. I bet that's your grandfather standing out in front of his tailor shop.
It is. It says Sam Wengrover Taylor. And when my mother met my father, she was living in St. Louis. She was in retail. And I guess it's in the blood. It skipped me, but my daughter is terribly interested in.
Okay, and this is Grandpa and
Yes.
Grandmother Wendover, or
Wengrover.
Wingrover.
Uh-huh.
And he came from the old country,
Yes.
as did she, but she came over as a baby, he came over as a teenager. They found each other and married. What a beautiful couple.
Thank you.
Nancy, I want to thank you very much for this interview as we go back on memory lane with your family's participation in the garment industry in Kansas City. And it certainly has been, they made a large contribution to what went on in the garment industry in Kansas City. And then subsequently, your daddy as banker to the garment industry of Kansas City for many years at the Empire Bank.
Thank you, and this has been really nice for me. There were wonderful memories. I always loved going downtown and smelling the coffee smell that is downtown to me, and I just have so many happy memories of hanging out with my dad there and going in the back.
Did you often go down with maybe your sisters and maybe Daddy take you out to lunch? Did he have time to do that?
Yes, it was really special that one day, each summer, he would take each one of us individually. This is when we were real little. When we were older, we worked down there, but when we were little, he would take one day and we would go and we would sit at the desk and be the secretary. He would take us out to lunch and we would go across the street to Natco and pick out underwear for the next school year and, go up and get anything that we could. I don't think I had a pair of girls' pajamas till I was 16. I always wore boys' pajamas. And
Where did he take you to lunch? What was your favorite lunch spot down there during those days? Down at the Savoy Grill.
Yeah. I'm a vegetarian now, but they had this hot dog that had cheese in it. I would always get that hot dog and the cinnamon rolls.
Thank God for the great memories, huh?
Yes.
Well, thank you again for this time together.
Thank you.
You're welcome.